What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 13 of Enter the Javelin, Mixer's first Anthem community web show. We gather here once a week to discuss the latest news, updates, and hot takes on Bioware's upcoming IP, Anthem, due out in February 2019. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Lupo, and I'll be the host for this evening. So, we're at a point now where we are in a little bit of a dead zone for Anthem news. So E3 was the last major trade show that we had, and we got a good amount of information. We got a trailer, we got some information from the devs, we got at the time 4 minutes of gameplay, so we have a little bit more now, which is great. So between then and now, about 3 to 4 weeks later, we got a 19-minute complete gameplay, and that's been absolutely astounding. Like, people have been picking it apart and looking at all the different aspects of that particular trailer, and what we have at this point is we have almost as many questions as we do answers in regards to Anthem. So the next, we can kind of talk about that a little bit, is to say, when's the next time we're going to see more information? And what are we going to see? I think at this point, it's pretty integral to the hype and the anticipation of the game now to give us more information on the loot system and the weapons, and then completely outline the two other classes that we haven't heard anything about. Well, one we've heard some, and one we haven't heard anything about, being the Storm that we've heard a little, and the Interceptor, which we've heard pretty much nothing else but the name. But we'll go into that a little bit later, because that's going to be our topic of discussion for today. It's kind of just speculation about the Interceptor in general. But before we get into that, we'll get into the little bit of news that we do have. So last week, in episode 12, we had Dan Tier from Low Manic Gaming on, and 3, maybe 4 hours before we decided to record the episode, Game Informer published an article with James Olin, who was the former narrative director and a writer with Bioware, and he did work on Anthem for a period of time. He was the narrative director for 6 months or so, and we didn't go too much into depth about it last week because I honestly didn't have a whole lot of time to read the article. So we're just going to look at that, just a few quotes specifically, because one of the things that this brings up is some of the other developers leaving the project, producers, writers, various other integral and not so integral members of the team leaving the project. Initially, this kind of sent up a bunch of red flags, and people were kind of skeptical about the project in general, because why are so many people leaving when this is a new IP? The game is doomed. You see everything on YouTube about these particular departures of tenured Bioware staff. And I think what's in this article, and I'll get to it just in a second here, is some reassuring things from a very long tenured Bioware writer. He was there for 22 years, James Olin, and part of pretty much every major project they've done. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Neverwinter Nights, Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars: The Old Republic, a little bit of Mass Effect, and also Anthem. So Game Informer sat down with him and just wanted to get his opinion on the development of Anthem and his future in the game industries, or his future in general, because he's obviously been in the industry quite a long time. So Game Informer asked James Olin, with you taking more of a hands-on creative role with Anthem, why leave in the middle of development? Was your role winding down as the game was ramping toward release? And James responded, I had stepped in to help out on parts of Anthem, but my role was not a huge one. So obviously, this is another thing that people are beginning to have misconceptions about, that some of these names that are leaving projects are more, they think that they're more impactful to the project than they actually are. So he's kind of letting some of that hesitation rest at ease, which is always a good thing. He goes on to say, I was working as the narrative director for a period of time, about 6 months, but then I handed off most of the leadership to Kathleen Rutsart, who's the lead writer there. And we saw Kathleen at E3, at EA Play, and she kind of delivered us the idea of the story and everything like that. She's been the lead writer. I think she's doing a fantastic job. She's been, with Bioware a very long time as well, dealing with a lot of the Mass Effect and stuff like that. So he continues to say, I just wasn't really in the place where I was like, do I want to go back to doing administrative director or of design type of things? I wasn't. I was in a place where I needed to go back to being focused on doing creative stuff. So that's where James actually ended up going. He went to, he left Bioware to work on his own project, more in line with Dungeons and Dragons, because that's his passion. He got into the gaming industry with things like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights, and kind of just wanted to expand on that and pursue his passion. And I can honestly respect that, because it's got to be I don't even know the right word. It's got to be an interesting concept to work for a developer and not necessarily love the project that you're working on. Obviously people work to get paid, and if you say, hey, if you're being contracted by your employer, or you're working for them, they're saying you're going to work on this particular project. You don't really have a choice in that fact. But where do you get to a point of saying, I don't like this at all, this is not what I want to work on, this is not where my heart is right now? And that's kind of like the general gist of what he's saying. It's not that he hated it. He did enjoy his time, and he thinks that everything is going well with Anthem. It's just he wanted to work on different projects. Another interesting thing, and I gotta find it here. Let's see. He was talking about the fact that, like, the one thing that a lot of people don't want to address is people say that if Anthem doesn't do well, BioWare's done as a studio. And I think this is largely a misconception, because of the fact that you have other EA studios where they're being acquired by EA, companies like Visceral and stuff like that. Like, I use Visceral because I love Dead Space so much, and it's something that happened relatively recently that we lost Visceral as a studio. But they'll acquire these smaller studios to work on these great projects, and Visceral's not the only one. There's a lot of them. And then once they fail to meet standards or business expectations or sales expectations or something like that, they'll absolve dissolve the studio, send employees to other studios that they're working on. Like, right now, they did the same thing with BioWare Montreal. So BioWare Montreal had they dissolved the studio, and a lot of the people went to work at EA Motive, and now from what I understand, EA Motive is working on a new IP. And Ian Fraser from Mass Effect, like, he did Mass Effect Andromeda, and I really respected his work on that and Kingdoms of Amalur. And he will be working on, or he is working on, a currently untitled new IP out of EA Motive, which is definitely encouraging, because it's a lot of the people that worked on Andromeda, and it's a completely new thing, and EA is excited about it, because they kind of talked about it in their earnings call a little bit. But we'll see. No one really knows what it's about, but we'll know soon enough, I'm sure. Probably in the next 2 years we'll know. But it was asked to James in this particular interview with Game Informer. Game Informer asks, speaking of conspiracy theories, one of the things that you see floating around on the internet right now is that due to Andromeda underwhelming and EA's reputation of having an itchy trigger finger when it comes to studio closures, BioWare will be shuttered if Anthem isn't a hit. Is there any sense internally among the staff that this is the level of pressure on the studio at this point? And James obviously shuts that down. He says, no. the more success the studio has, the more freedom and resources that it has. So obviously Bioware wants to have success with Anthem because that will be good for the studio as a whole. However, I think EA is looking for Bioware to be a long-term part of the company. I think EA really respects Bioware, what Bioware brings to it. Bioware is a lot different than all the other aspects of its business. So even if Anthem doesn't do as well, and I think it's going to do great, but if it doesn't do gangbusters, I don't think that's the end of Bioware. I think it will simply be a chance for Bioware to learn some lessons and apply it to the next game that comes out. Now, we know that Dragon Age 4, or whatever they're going to call it in the end, is in production, and it should be, we say should with fingers crossed here, that it should be out sometime in 2020, maybe 2021. So the idea that BioWare would just be shuttered as a studio has kind of always been ridiculous to me personally. But also too is that BioWare brought back Casey Hudson as the GM to further cultivate Mass Effect, to bring that back, to bring the fabled franchise back to glory, and with the success of Anthem, if it does have success, which I personally think there is going to be, you're going to see that moving forward. You're going to see them talking about Mass Effect. I'm sure the people working on Anthem right now is pretty large, and depending on the success and how much it's going to take to cultivate the game as a live service, or support the game as a live service, depends on how many people are going to remain there. But I'm sure they're going to put more people on Dragon Age and on the next Mass Effect iteration. It's from my understanding that a lot of the live service aspect of Anthem is going to be handled by the Austin studio, which is the studio that's currently doing Star Wars: The Old Republic. So obviously, that's a long running MMO. They've been going since 2011, so that's 7 years. 7 years of live service, which is not anything to bat an eyelash at. That's successful. As much as people may have their reservations on the gameplay or how the game was received or anything like that, but if the game is still played 7 years later and they're still supporting it even relatively well, I call that successful. And Austin has a large part of what's going on, as much as Edmonton is designing the game, and they're doing a great job so far from what I've seen, which is not a whole lot. It's really, when you think about it, it's maybe a half hour worth of footage tops. That's kind of what we have to go off of right now, and I don't think that's a little bit, but I think a lot of people would like to have seen more at this point. But for me personally, that's the biggest takeaways from this particular interview with James Olin, former writer at BioWare. I will link this article with Game Informer in the description below if you're watching on YouTube. The next thing is all little things. So I'll kind of take the rest of my other things that we've seen here and throw them into the next topic of conversation that I want to kind of discuss shortly. And we're not going to take a whole lot of time today because there's just not a whole lot to talk about. I don't want to drag out something just to drag out something. So I talked about it at the top of the show that the one thing we don't know a lot about right now is the Interceptor class. And I think that's by design. Now, the Interceptor is obviously the newest class. We've only seen it as of this year. Ranger, Colossus, Storm, we all saw at last year's at E3 2017 at the trailer, or the gameplay footage that we saw there. And they really wanted to put this Interceptor in to kind of balance that 4-player group. They're going to make a 4-player squad. So if you're going to have a 4-player squad, you kind of want to have 4 separate classes to fill those particular roles, so everyone's not doing the same exact thing. And that's obviously not like a specific design, because they say you can team comp any way you want, and that's encouraging as well. But just to give you that visual representation of it being 4 separate things, they wanted to have that in the game. It's actually, let's see, I had the quote here before. Ben Irving, he's one of the producers. He was in the Freelancer Codex Discord because they were talking about the scene in the most recent trailer of the Interceptor throwing a grenade. Now, I'll actually further elaborate of how we got to this conversation here where we are right now. So, Freelancer Codex reached out to Mark Darrah on Twitter and said, well, I think someone else asked it first. Someone else asked Mark Darrah about the grenades, and they say grenades of all sorts are tied to the Ranger class. So you did see in the trailer that we were just talking about that the Interceptor has a grenade and throws the grenade and saves the Ranger and this, that, and the other thing. Now, it's been iterated twice to us by Mark Darrah that this was creative freedom in the trailer, by the people that made the trailer. Like, obviously the trailer was not made by a direct Bioware or EA employee. It was subcontracted out, and they were, given the ability to adapt it for the greatest impact. Now, it's been fully confirmed that Interceptors do not have grenades, will not have grenades. And the biggest reason why they put it in the trailer is because they wanted to show it, have that physical representation of the fourth member. So, Ben Irving said, we are building the Interceptor last, so there wasn't anything we were willing to show at the time. All the grenades you have seen so far are for the Ranger. Read this as, Ben doesn't want to talk about the Intercept, not as, oh my god, there will be more different grenades for the Interceptor. It was important to show all 4 Javelins to show that it's a 4-player game with 4 unique Javelins available at launch. That put us in a tough spot, so the decision was made to use a grenade on the Interceptor. It is what it is. Even if it was the intent, many things like this will change on the road to launch. Some things we say will end up being incorrect, and some trailers will have things invalidated. In our opinion, we think it's best to be transparent and risk being wrong rather than keep risk being wrong than to keep everything close to our chest. So they wanted to show it, but the kit's not finished. Like, the idea, everything that the Interceptor is going to have is not fully iterated at this point, and they just wanted to have a physical representation of what is potentially going to be there. Now, we will kind of sort of discuss some of the things that we've read so far, and we can kind of speculate about what the Interceptor will be. The first thing that we heard about the Interceptor was going to be the Rogue class. It wasn't specifically said the Rogue class, but Mark Darrah was asked about it and said, what's it going to be like? And he said, think Rogue. Now, if you go to stereotypical, like, Dungeons and Dragons prototypical Rogue, I'm reading this word for word from Wikipedia from people that have taken their time to curate this. The Rogue or Thief is one of the standard playable character classes in most editions of Dungeons & Dragons fantasy role-playing game. A rogue is a versatile character capable of sneaky combat and nimble tricks. The rogue is stealthy and dexterous, and in early editions was only official base class for the player's handbook, capable of finding and disarming traps and picking locks. The rogue also has the ability to sneak attack, or it was called backstab at one point, enemies who are caught off guard or taken by surprise, inflicting extra damage. Now, that sounds very much like the Infiltrator class in Mass Effect. So, and I'm giving dramatic pauses for obvious reasons here, but we'll talk about it just a very little bit. It has been asked before if there will be stealth or cloaking in the game, and Mark Darrah's specific response was, "We're not ready to talk about the Storm or the Interceptor just yet." So, I mean, that gives me the impression that that is something that is going to be on that. Now, from what this description says, let's see, enemies who are caught off guard or taken by surprise, inflicting extra damage. So, the tactical cloak in Mass Effect gave you the ability to give boosted damage on crits when you were cloaked. This is definitely something that I could see the Interceptor using. They were talking recently, and I think it was actually mentioned before, that, you know, there will be snipers in the game. I mean, John Warner said that in his interview with Game Informer at the end of their feature period in Game Informer, that there are sniper rifles in the game. There's going to be scope weapons in the game, and these are things that we can see this particular class having. Now, it hasn't been laid out to us what classes are going to have what particular guns. Like, you know, we do know that Colossi that's plural for Colossus, Colossi, will not have pistols. You know, which kind of makes sense. You have a big Hulk, and he's not going to have these small weapons. I'm also going to assume that he's not going to have SMGs or something like that. So it's not without, you know, it's not outside the realm of possibility that the Interceptor is the only class that can use a sniper rifle. Because of its nature, it's going to be, you know, have those kind of sneak attacks. You're attacking from distance, or you're going in up close. I'm sure you're going to have multiple builds like that, where you can build, you know, spec a build to be a far away attacker with a sniper rifle, or you can be up close with you know, machine pistols or something like that, and use your cloaking to get around people. Also, the thing with lockpicking and traps, I think that's going to be very important to the Interceptor's usefulness in the game. And even it's like, you say the name Interceptor, like there's got to be an obvious reason of why they're using this particular term to call it that. You know, I mean, it sounds cool. Yes, it does sound cool, but Interceptor means you're intercepting something. You're cutting things off. You're breaking the chain of what's normally happening. You're cutting off the trajectory. So thinking that the Interceptor is going to be there for a lockpicking or finding traps or hidden snares or something like that also plays into this particular rogue ideal, and I think that's really good. The other thing that, me personally, I feel that the Interceptor is going to be very much like, because you can even see it in design, is Zero in Borderlands, which is known as the Assassin. And if you look at, I'm going off of IGN's wiki for Borderlands 2. Zero represents the Assassin class in Borderlands 2. The Assassin obliterates enemies. He specializes in high burst damage on single targets rather than large areas of damage. He also enjoys poetically narrating his proficiency of killing in haiku. That's just, you know, some in-game type of stuff. Zero can perform massive amounts of damage quickly, either with melee combat or from a distance. Zero is the finisher of the group, being particularly effective when fighting single enemies and can kill them all faster than any other class. However, Zero is less effective against a large number of enemies. And I think this really plays to that that Interceptor rogue ideal, and I think this is kind of where they may have gotten some inspiration for the Interceptor in general. So I'm curious to see everybody else's thoughts on the Interceptor. I think it's going to be a fun class to play for people that like to snipe, like to do damage and stuff like that. But I also think that it's going to have cloaking abilities. I think it's going to have some sort of speed ability, like a boosted speed, where it can revive enemies. You know, they did say this week there's going to be, like a downed state. So if you take too much damage and you lose all your energy, you're going to go into a down state, which you can obviously be revived. And I think that the Interceptor may be someone, is obviously intercepting this critical situation here, and this is something that his class will specialize in. They have said in the past, the question was asked, will there be support class? I want to know more about support and healing classes, and they said, we're not talking about the Storm or Interceptor at this time. So things kind of start adding up, and that's kind of how I feel about the Interceptor as a whole. And I'm really looking forward to the Interceptor, because I think it's something that if it's a healer or a support class, I'm all about it. I am definitely all about that. I personally think that the Storm is going to be more of like the support class, like buffing and debuffing, and then your Intercept is going to be like your high spike DPS type of class, which I think is really good too. You know, you have the hulking tank, you have the all-arounder, you have the magic class or buffing class or healing class, and now the Intercept is going to be that high spike damage type of thing, which is, you know, really fun. I think that's the way you have to look at it. You want things to be fun. You don't want to just you don't want it to be a job. You know, like I understand like everyone's gonna have a role and you know have a specific thing that they like to do, but it's gonna be fun too. So this is gonna play well to the people that loved the Infiltrator class in Mass Effect. My last Mass Effect playthrough was an Infiltrator, and I had a lot of fun doing that. You know, you kind of sneak around enemies, get to a nice spot, you get off that nice crispy snipe, and I mean, if they can make guns like the Black Widow in Anthem, like people are gonna love sniping in Anthem. And I think with some of the bigger boss fights that we may see, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So I mean, that's really like that was my piece for this week, guys. I just wanted to talk about something, just kind of gathering information over the last few days or so. Interview with James Olin. That was probably the biggest thing from the last week. Wanted to get some thoughts out about the Interceptor class. We did talk a little bit about how Anthem's success is ultimately going to drive Bioware as a studio moving forward, and hopefully bring them back to glory to where they were in the Mass Effect days and the Dragon Age, you know, the good Dragon Age days. And I think it's you know, up is the only place from here for them. It's really, really encouraging to see everything, the way everything's going. They're receiving tons of accolades from all sorts of media on Anthem. The game changers are really enjoying what they're seeing, and I couldn't be more excited about what we're going to see in the very near future. So before we close out here, we're just gonna go over some of the things that we may see in the near future. So the next opportunity for some sort of reveal is going to be at Gamescom, and I don't think that we're going to see the largest showing there. I have it on reliable authority that the game will be playable there. I don't know if that's going to be a public playable thing, or if it's going to be a game changer or, you know, privilege access type of thing, but it's going to be playable. I do have a source that he's going there to, or hoping to go there to play it, and he's been on the show before. It's Bags from Anthem Insider, and you can check out his content at antheminsider.com if he gets himself there, because I know he's having some troubles with flights and all that kind of stuff, but that's human types of things. If he gets himself to Gamescom and gets his hands on Anthem, he will be on the show to talk about it a little bit more, and I'm really excited about that. So look forward to that in like the first week of September. Speaking of first week of September, that would be the next time that we see something, and that would be PAX West or PAX Prime, whichever you want to call it, in Seattle. So that's the following week from Gamescom, but that's obviously in America, and I know that Mark Dara is going to be there. There's going to be some other Bioware brass at PAX West, so I don't see why they wouldn't show the game off there, even in larger capacity. Now, there's community rumblings that we may see a blog about the music and the audio in Anthem. There was someone working at Bioware that suggested that we may see that relatively soon. They actually said we should have seen it 2 weeks ago, and you know, it's kind of the community is a little up in arms about it. So we'll play that by ear and see what's going to happen with that. Like, I have zero expectation from Bioware and EA about that. So if we get something, we get something. If we don't, we don't. But Mike Gamble did say we should see something in the summer, and I mean the last day of summer is September 22nd. So worst comes to worst, 6-7 weeks, and we'll have some some more meat, some more substance to Anthem and what we know about it. I think by that time we'll have a date on the demos, if not have it in our hands at that point. Like we might have it the first week of September. But like I said, no, I don't have particular expectations about those things. If we get them, we get them. If we don't, we don't. Absolutely. More like Morbid says in the chat, looking forward to that information. I agree 100%, man. And it's just we're sitting here in a hold position, kind of waiting for things to happen. And it's just been the hardest time trying to wait it out, as a fan and a content creator. So I'd say no less than 3 weeks and no more than 7 that we'll have more information. Gamescom, PAX West, and then by the end of the summer, which is September 22nd. Like I'm not trying to push that date hard, but it's just like, autumnal equinox if you want to get technical about it. So that's really all I got today, guys. We're gonna be back next week. Hopefully we have some more news. We'll kind of keep things in the short form for the time being until we have some substance. Leave some comments down below in the comments section about anybody you might want to see on here. We'll make some phone calls, have some conversations about who we can get on here. We've had Sly Nation, Dan Tier from Lomatic Gaming, Bags from Anthem Insider. I had Wade from Mulehorn Gaming, and they are all great panels, great people to interview on here, and we can definitely have them back on again. So we will be reaching out to some Mixer partners very soon to get them on here. But until next time, guys, I think that's going to be everything, and I will see everybody next week. Oh, sorry.